Playtesting and demoing is an essential part of making your game fun. A lot of developers leave it till too late, or alternatively, they just assume that their gamer intuition will be enough. I'm Brano, and I get people to playtest my game a lot. In fact, I'll have a demo available on the 13th of May for Steam's Endless Gameplay Festival. Healed to Death is a roguelike where you lead a party of heroes down procedurally generated dungeons as the healer. Check out the Steam page in the link below. I started to develop this game in August, and by November it had its first build ready for testing. Since then, I have had around 12 different playable builds. And every single time, I noticed a clear improvement in people's average enjoyment of the game. I'm a big believer in playtest early, playtest often, and I hope I can convince you to be the same. There are 4 main topics I want to talk about. The primary benefit of playtesting, how to handle feedback, how demos improve your development cycle, and how to get over your fear of negativity. The primary benefit of playtesting can be summarized in a single question. Are the players playing the game correctly? You're not actually looking for high-level feedback. What you're looking for is all the little micro details that prevent a player from enjoying their experience. The most common issues you will hear about are problems with the controls, problems with understanding a mechanic, or simply just getting lost and not knowing where to go. Now, sometimes it is a learn to play, get good situation, but it's really up to you to decide whether or not someone's struggle is fair or not. I personally believe that if a player is unable to understand why they are struggling with their game, it is your fault as a designer. I'll give some examples. In Platform Gun, you have a gun that shoots platforms and you can ride on them. A lot of people could not figure this out. This posed 3 options for me. Do I let people fail on the second screen of the game? Do I redesign the area to try and encourage the desired behavior? Or do I accept defeat and implement some hand-holding guidance for this specific area? For this case, and because it was the second screen of the game, I decided to take the easy way out, and I'm glad I did because once most players got past this area, they actually understood the main mechanic of the game. Another example with Platform Gun was with these eye enemies. If you turned away, they would open their eye, and if you faced them, they would close. I thought this was a pretty obvious mechanic, but a good 60% of people spent many minutes trying to work out this mechanic. So I decided to add another eye into the scene, and this caused a situation where there would always be one eye open, and this made people understand the mechanic significantly faster than they otherwise would. I would not have caught this had playtesting not occurred multiple times. The most important thing is to just try and absorb information. You want good faith feedback that lets people voice their actual issues with your game. If you can't respond 100% respectfully, you don't respond at all. If the feedback is in bad faith, then you just ignore it. I cannot count the number of times I've seen people respond to a negative comment with their own negativity, only for it to spiral out into an all-out flame war. It's like getting stung by a wasp, throwing a rock at the nest in retaliation, and then complaining about how much of a victim you are when the entire hive goes after you. Whether you like it or not, you are the authority figure of your game, and because you are the authority figure, you are held to a higher standard. With written feedback, you have to acknowledge that a lot of the criticism may not make sense because the players don't properly understand the mechanics. But that doesn't mean that their experience or feedback is invalid. In fact, it will probably point to the problem indirectly. There is likely a flaw with how you're teaching the player mechanics. This is why watching gameplay in either real time or on a video is infinitely more valuable than written feedback. You get to see the confusion and the frustration in real time, as well as any potential misunderstanding that may have led to the problem. It really is the best form of feedback you can get. The majority of feedback you will find is going to be small micro issues, such as people finding things unintuitive. For this type of feedback, you write it down, you decide what you agree with, and you just implement the change. You will probably agree with a lot of the small micro changes because it's really minor and it just feels like polish at the end of the day. When it comes down to larger macro criticism with your game, such as your art is bad or this system isn't fun, you need to start documenting the percentage of people who mention that as part of their feedback. If it begins to be large enough, you should start asking the people who didn't list that criticism what they think of that feedback in private. If they agree with the criticism, then you probably have a major flaw in your game that you need to fix. A recent example with Healed to Death is that in my first non-tutorial area, I had a death timer that would spawn enemies that would kill you, so you had to complete the level with some speed, and people found it frustrating. I did some small redesigns to try and fix this problem, but ultimately I had to give in and accept that having a death timer is too stressful for the initial level when people are still learning the game. It's pretty obvious in hindsight, but you get so used to playtesting your own game that you become blind to its flaws and begin to develop an acquired taste for your own work. A big problem with a lot of indies is that the development structure is often extremely ad hoc and entirely based on what the developer feels like making at the moment. This leads to a lot of development cycles that look like this. The value of having demos is that you give yourself deadlines to get stuff done, but also that you have to design your game in meaningful chunks. I am of the opinion that modding, expansions, and DLC content are significantly easier to make from a game design perspective. The game clearly has its own identity and its own rules, but there are these soft limitations that help guide you towards the next logical step in development. When you develop a game around demos, you turn a big architectural project into a large series of logical renovations. In game development, this makes sense because games with any form of innovation cannot be accurately planned from start to finish without major changes. Demos provide so much flexibility to pivot without having to sacrifice too much on the structural end. But there are some costs with this. You will have to spend 1 to 3 days wrapping up what you have done and fixing a bunch of content that is likely going to be thrown out. But it will save you time as planning for the next stages of development becomes significantly easier. You eliminate a lot of potential core design issues by catching what doesn't work early and making the adjustments before too much time has been sunk into a specific area of the game. If you want to work effectively, you need structure and a plan. If you want to work with flexibility, you need to be able to break away from the plan. I think that working towards a demo every 2 months is the perfect balance for me. It gives me enough time to make meaningful updates while also giving me the flexibility to take some design risks that were not originally planned from the very beginning. One of the worst things you can do is associate your self-worth with your games. That can be a bit hard if you don't have anything else going on in your life. But you kinda have to view your games like children. They start off as your baby only to quickly show their own personalities that you could have never anticipated. Like a ballerina mum's daughter or a football dad's son, you don't want to force a game to be something that it's not. You're better off just accepting that the game's got its own personality and you're really just there to guide it to its natural destination to the best of your ability. I have the mentality that the game is its own entity and I'm just the person that works on it. You see a lot of bitter game developers complain about gamers, and I still to this day find it ridiculous. I want to make good games and gamers want to play good games. We are on the same side, and if your game sucks, it's rarely about you. I've tried a bunch of creative endeavors in my life, and I can definitely say that negative feedback is almost always better than no feedback. Because negative feedback shows that people cared enough about your work to leave a comment. If you get a comment like, "Hey, I don't like your game for this reason," and your response is, "Yeah, the game could definitely be changed to do that better," you're in good shape. You've just framed the developer and the gamer as a united force against the problem with the game. This is a framing trick that can be widely used to most negative feedback or interactions. If you cannot bring yourself to do that, then you say nothing. If it's a personal attack against you, then you either ignore it, or you just remove the comment and block the user. It is essential that you keep the feedback environment as healthy and non-judgmental as possible. You don't want to be the game developer that gets defensive when your game gets criticized. If you think otherwise, I've got news for you.
This is the internet. Prepare to get your shit kicked in if you somehow think that for a second you are immune to criticism.
Now, you will have situations in real life where the person is really pushy, and the best way I've found to defuse the situation is just to say, "Thanks for the feedback, I'll need some time to consider it with the rest of the feedback I've received today." You want to weigh out without making the person feel like their feedback hasn't been valued. If you're still unsure about whether or not you can handle the negative feedback, then just remember, it's better to experience dealing with negativity while the project is small and a free demo, than having to deal with the tidal wave of criticism you will get on launch day when people have actually spent money. So give demoing a try. I think it's worth your time. And don't forget to check out the demo for Heal to Death on Steam, May 13th, link in the description.